So my first question, and I haven't asked this question before, and that is, what is a fun way or interesting way to use a dragon in a Dungeons and Dragons or a role play game that you've sort of come up with? And I'm going to start off with Opal.
One of my favorite tidbits about dragons is their regional effects, like their lair effects and their regional effects, how they affect the world around them. And I also love how there are stages of progression in a dragon from, the wormling to the great worm, which is like over 1,000 years old. Um, I I kind of got this inspiration from, I would say, probably Terry Pratchett's Discworld with the great Atuan turtle where, things live on its back. It's like this big planetary feature. But I think it'd be cool. Pardon me, you can edit that out and post all of my little cold hiccups. I think it would be cool if you had this great wormling that's thousands of years old. For the last couple hundred years, it's been asleep or dormant, and everyone who saw it go down, I suppose, has forgotten about it. And they've started, like the environment has been repossessing that lost land and growing and building on top of this great wormling. Civilizations have forgotten, and they've started building homes and lands on top of it. And I suppose this could play well into a plot hook of there are environmental factors, there are, earthquakes and tsunamis or whatever. Nobody expects like a great black dragon to have this like acidic air rooting this town, and perhaps players have to figure out what's going on and what is happening in the land. And what happens is your great wormling or your great worm dragon is reawakening. I think it'd be interesting to, have players find out that it really is just this dragon and figure out what to do.
Cool. Thank you. Kevin, have you got something you would like to add?
Well, and it's interesting what Opal was saying about the stages of dragons. And I did a video on the dragons, I don't know, a year or so ago, and I'm thinking about this. You have dragons, you have the wormling and the young adult dragon. And I thought in terms of their lifespan, think about those dragons, let's say the young dragon, as almost a teenage dragon. It hasn't matured. It's out in the world, and it does things that a teenager, it's impetuous, it's reckless. I remember reading a story about it was a game park in Africa where the bull elephants have been killed by poachers, and the young elephants began doing things like attacking rhinos and attacking water buffaloes, and the rangers had to fly in. There's a famous shot of them flying this bull elephant in, putting him down in the thing, and he got all the young elephants in line. Don't attack rhinos because you just get, speared. And so I think about that. The other thing about a wormling, which would be sort of a childlike dragon, and a young dragon as a teenager, is a lot of the groups that you have can run against or with that sort of dragon. The metallic dragons shape change, but as it says in there, and I would agree, you can have any kind of dragon. I know they're supposed to be adult or older to have the shape change, but you could have a younger dragon that is curious about people and wants to, go with a group or, with humans. And they talk about metallic dragons sometimes interacting with humans and the character races just to check them out. So to me, that's the thing. You can integrate with a lower level group, because I had people after I did that series who said in our campaign, we never run into dragons, which just amazed me because, it's in the name of the game. So it's a way not only to having a young dragon, but having it not the typical malevolent, super intelligent, dragon that we think of, but it's learning, it's going through the world.
Yeah, that's a nice expansion, Kevin. And I since we use those dragons probably more than the other ones quite often, it makes sense. Freeman, Mr. Rhexx.
I have been fascinated lately about the idea of using, because dragons are creatures of inherent magic, right? So if this guy chills in a house for 20 years, the house becomes magical, right? And each dragon has its own very unique way of attracting the natural magic around them. Their blood is supposed to be magical. That's my dog. He's not magical. The eyes of the dragon have magic in them, and they function really interestingly. They have this organ called the Draconis Fundamentum that gives them, it allows for their muscles to be able to lift such an enormous body, because normally, like, birds have hollow bones, right? Dragons don't, but they can still fly. There's a reason for that, right? And so I've been really fascinated at just like experimenting with old editions lore when it comes to what happens if you grab blood from a dragon. What happens if you drink it? Because this is something that players love to figure out. You can make cultures based on this. If you have a culture that hunts dragons, you would imagine that they would have all kinds of stuff related to dragon blood or bones, and we have lore for that. We know that the dragon's heart, for example, can change destiny, whatever that means, right? If you have a big spell, if you have like an evil person who's is trying to, for example, like you have the evil Dark Lord, and he's trying to figure out how to get rid of the hero. He uses a dragon heart because it modifies destiny. Blood, you can sacrifice a dragon in order to be able to cast spells that you normally wouldn't be able to cast because you don't have the power, because dragon blood is power. I've been really fascinated with that stuff. I don't want to take more time, but I could go on, but...
Well, the fact is, when I open this up, but we probably will go more on into stuff. But I do like the idea because it feels very sort of primitive North American Indian. You eat the animal and you take on its power in some way. So that's cool. Glenn, have you got some ideas for dragons?
Okay, going to the Mystara setting because that's what I talk about. Dragons are tied heavily into the lawful chaotic alignment, but they're not tied completely into good or evil. So there is, for the metallics and the chromatics, and for a greater chance for the gemstones, there's a chance that their alignment's going to be different. There's a 5% chance that a red dragon's going to be chaotic neutral. There's a 1% chance that it'll be chaotic good. And for the gold dragons, it's vice versa. So what you do is you introduce the characters to that one red dragon in 100 that's actually chaotic good. They have one called Respinap Tarkus, Draconic Earl, and we played him like Lord Flashheart from Blackadder, where he's like walking in and he's like dressed all flamboyant in his human form, and he's like, "Hi!" It's like, I'm here to adventure and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. He's like, "Woof!" And like just over the top, he's embracing the human culture. He has no idea what the human culture is. And he remembers everybody's name. He insults you and compliments you at the same time, and you're dealing with a massive culture clash from a dragon that likes to be around humans, but doesn't understand that if he fist bumps them, he's going to put them through the wall. And that's how we deal with the dragon with, yes, he's got a draconic form. Yes, he can torch an entire city block, but he wants to experience life in other cultures. And the party's got to deal with the fact that, yes, he can be a really good friend, but he's also a 1,200-year-old dragon. So that's how we handled the dragons, at least in the known world.
That's a good idea. And the culture clash will be interesting, and nobody will know what's going on. AJ, what have you got for dragons?
So much. I have to sort of narrow it down to something I haven't really talked about before, and that you touched on the idea of dragons waking up. If there's a cataclysm, all the dragons wake up at the same time, and all of a sudden you've got dragon politics going on around you, and the adventurers are just basically scrambling to get out of the way. And you get a sneak peek of what a world dominated by dragons might look like, and then you realize that most of the time they're actually all asleep. So it's just like you have to deal with them when they pop up every now and then, but don't wake them all up at the same time. And of course, in the Forgotten Realms, you've got Zorventhal, which is a ritual that dragons can undergo where they give up their natural magic to take on a more manipulative magic style, and they are restricted to not attacking other dragons that are involved in this great game, and basically manipulate forces around them. So they can do that too. But the idea I had was for any dragon can shape change, as you said, because they can use potions and spells and scrolls and things like that. And the idea of a secretive sub-society of shapeshifters of all different varieties, doppelgangers and oozes who can, take on different shapes and things like that, the ooblex and things, and even lycanthropes as well. Certainly were-rats underneath the city and the sewers and things, and who would be the top of the food chain of the shapeshifters? A dragon.
Yep. Absolutely. So you mentioned something about the great game and dragons, and I'm going to come back to that, AJ, because you know I like it when you talk about that sort of stuff. But my idea is actually spawned from a discussion that I had with another panel a while ago, and I put forward the concept that, well, if you're going to have a banker, like, who's the best banker to have? And I feel like a dragon is like the best banker that you could possibly have, because they're going to make sure that stuff's not going anywhere. So you invest in a dragon, a bank, like a bank that's actually controlled by a dragon or dragons. Although I think you're probably better just to go with the ancient dragon. There won't be too many politics. You won't have sort of fraud occurring otherwise. One dragon's probably enough. So, and you have a portal system where you put your deposits in, you get your deposits out through a portal system, and it all gets deposited in various places and organised by the kobold minions that work the bank for this ancient dragon. You can't go wrong. Like, that money is not going anywhere. Somebody's stupid enough to go in there, yeah, they're not going to survive. And then I followed on because I used to work in insurance, and I thought, who would be the smartest and wisest individual to make the underwriter in an insurance company? And I know everybody's thinking, Fred, but I have no intentions of putting an insurance company in my game. Like, where did you get that from? And I'm like, because I do. That's where I was going with this. And I feel like a dragon is the right person. There's the right amount of intelligence, or the right amount of wisdom. They've got the experience, they probably can do multiple roles, not just underwriter. And they've got all the time in the world. So, make sure to sign up to insurance companies that have an underwriter who is a dragon. And those are my ideas, and I'm going to pass it over and open the floor for those of you who might have something missing that you wanted to discuss. Go for it.
Well, the different types of... we're going to start talking at once. Let's do it. The different types of dragons have got different personalities. And even in the same role, say as a banker, for instance, a blue dragon would operate completely differently from a green dragon. Blue dragon would be the mob boss. They'd surround themselves with toadies and minions, and kind of like Jabba the Hutt's palace is how I think of the blue dragon. And of course, they operate, because they can release electricity, they're a really good combination paired up with flesh golems, who just get charged up on that sort of thing. So imagine a bank where all of the automatons are dealing with the things for you, and you don't want to call in the manager because you're having trouble.
I love the idea that, like, instead of interest, it's just them eating a little bit of the money. It's a little bit.
It's funny you talk about alchemical uses of dragons, and I thought they are the alchemical stone. They turn blood into gold.
When I was listening to Rhexx talk about all the dragon parts, I had every little piece from Peach Dragon going through my head. Singing about all the different parts of the dragon. Like, dragon tears will cure the cold. Dragon scales, you'll never grow old.
That's interesting. I was thinking when you were talking about the great game historically, right? England and Russia fighting over all these countries in the Central Asia, and the dragons, the concept of their arrogance and we are the rulers of the world, and everyone else is in the great, like there's some kind of, and again, you work this out in your world. And it's interesting because when I look through Fizben, I didn't look at it in super detail, but at one point they say in a 300-mile area, there might be dozens of dragons. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of dragons. I tend to think of them as a little more isolated and also competing with each other.
Mm.
And the other thing I thought about was the sleeping thing, which comes, I think, from Nordic sagas. Tolkien obviously used it in The Hobbit. This is something that, because the hero would be able to sneak in and steal something, and this idea that they sleep, it's not explained. Maybe it is somewhere, but it's a fascinating thing in terms of how long they sleep, because this comes from a different tradition outside the game, and it's good to integrate that. We always had a sleeping dragon that you would try to sneak in on. That was just our modus operandi. This is the box set and all that stuff.
Yeah, in the early editions of the game, there was always a 50% chance that the dragon would be asleep. So it was a very strong tradition when Dungeons & Dragons first came around.
And you were worried about
they didn't really
waking
need
that
to
dragon up.
over-explain things back then either. So,
No. The lore was limited.
Zorventhal is still very it's very topical and active in the realms right now, the current realms, because Murgome and Semfar and those areas there have got a new arrangement going on where there's a new cabal of dragons who are not attacking each other, and they've managed to dominate those countries. Very important countries, because one of those is the seat of the original Dwarven civilization. So there's a lot of powerful artifacts and things there, and they're in a central position between Karatur, which worships dragons, and the Forgotten Realms, which is the giants are in disarray, and civilization is currently at an ebb. Netherall has fallen. The Dragon Rage mythal has now switched off, so the dragons are free to return from the outer planes and dominate the lands like they used to.
It's almost like an alien invasion, right? Like, we as humans, we're used to being on top of the food chain, and imagine if this, like, a mass of dragons just came and, like, intelligent dragons overtook our societies. That's pretty close to an alien invasion.
I mean, can you imagine the Game of Thrones if one of those dragons turned around and started talking?
Well,
And a lot of times it's really scary because it feels like you can't do anything about it, right? Like, okay, well, there is an ancient dragon over there, and he can just fly in, destroy 30 villages, just kind of in a single flight, and then just disappear into the mountains, never to be seen again. Maybe another
Doesn't
30
care
years
about
later, does it again.
Yeah.
Funny thing is if they start talking, when I started taking my Welsh lessons, the first word they ever taught us was draig, which is dragon. I'm prepared for this.
Is that
Well,
their
it's
national
interesting.
animal?
Yes, it's on the flag. I have a Welsh
the
flag
flag,
outside
yeah.
in my yard. Because that way, we used to call the pizza guys, like, look for the green and white flag with a dragon on it. We could put out a Texas flag or an American flag, but that doesn't narrow it down much. Ain't nobody here speak Welsh.
So
Well,
you've mentioned the great game, and so I figure that AJ, Mr. Rhexx, or Mr. Welch probably know the most about the great game. I know only what AJ's mentioned to me, because if you go looking for information on it, well, you won't find it in Fizzbands, and you probably won't find it easily. So maybe somebody should explain that, because it's actually quite an interesting concept.
Let me say this, is like, I don't know, Mystara cosmology and dragons is very different, because they are like locked away. They're like a preserve. So we don't have the dragon gods. We have the four dragon immortals. And they try to explain it all in the book Dragon Lord of Mystara, but it was a terrible book. And it's been disowned. And it was like, so the Mystara dragons are completely, they actually are they have orders to play nice with everybody else from the dragon immortals. And so they actually have knights, which serve as ambassadors, so the dragons don't kill the little guys don't gang up on the dragons. So we don't actually have a great game. We have everybody play nice or else.
An uneasy peace, a Cold War going on sort of thing. Zorventhal is kind of like a Cold War too, in that, it's a game of intrigue. It's the way that these dragons keep themselves entertained. They don't want to attack each other directly, because it doesn't benefit anybody for all the dragons to kill each other. And they have much more fun manipulating the smaller races and accumulating vast hordes of wealth. So yeah, Zorventhal is simply that. It's a game of intrigue. It's a game of the Dragon Thrones, essentially, where they are prevented from casting direct damaging spells and things like that, because they go through this ritual, and the ritual ties them spiritually into this game as well. So it's a bit more complicated, and it's a big commitment from them. But of course, they have these long-running traditions, so now they've inherited their reputation and their ties and their links to a house of this game. So their mentor and their mentor and their mentor become their reputation behind them. So it's almost like they're Jedi being trained by this Jedi being trained by this Jedi, or Sith, as the case may be. So they're manipulating things in the background, and they may assume leadership positions just to get into somebody's territory and get their agents to work against each other. So that involves the player characters, because now dragons are patrons or enemies of you that you're not confronting directly. you're getting involved in city politics, liches, the Twisted Rune, the Harpers, the Lord's Alliance, that sort of stuff.
Did you want to add anything, Mr. Rhexx?
Not particularly. I know the concept, like from I haven't like done really much like reading on this. It just sounds fascinating to me, the whole notion of it. The why, just the concept of like dragons basically just being like, we're not really going to like take this very seriously, or like in terms of just like form armies and attack each other or take over the world anymore. It's just more like, let's just do this other thing instead. Maybe have some fun or collect hordes, and then the question of why are they collecting hordes? What does it do? Which is something else. It's. I just want to make an adventure about this now, though. Like, just haven't really done much research into this.
It's like we play war games with toy dragons. They play war games with actual people.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That sounds incredible. I want to do a video about this. This is like great.
Hence why I always get AJ to talk about it. If we're going to talk about dragons, we've got to talk about the great game. Kevin, did you want to add anything? You are muted.
No, it's interesting because is that the Forgotten Realms mythos?
Yeah.
Right? 'Cause I haven't thought about that, because I tend to make up my own, and it's interesting because as I said, I would tend to make them rare, or there's always this thing in not just Tolkien, but a lot of legends, Icelandic sagas, or whatever, that dragons are from this earlier period, and I think it's because if they were around, it would be what AJ's talking, the Forgotten Realms setting, where they're in charge in a way. There always has to be some hindrance to them. So it's
if you wanted
to think about
a low magic setting, drakes, of course. Drakes never get enough attention. Drakes are ubiquitous in the environment. They make up an entire ecosystem in and of themselves. So you've got riding drakes and guard drakes and stuff. They got a lot more attention, I think, in 4th edition and 3.5 in the later years. There's some really nasty swarms of little attack drakes and things that you can have. And I like the idea that dragons would have been drakes if they weren't messed with by ancient creator civilizations in a series of evolutions and things that just sort of took advantage of certain traits that these mutant dragons had because they got a little bit too close to strange energies. And
there's some really wild books to read, by the way. Those like old, like first or second, I think it might have been 1st edition, where they talk about the evolution of dragons and how they came from dinosaurs, and you have like multiple like genealogical trees and how they differ. It's wild.
Yeah,
and I don't know how much of that is still like used or canon anymore, because they kind of did the whole like Ice Age that then turns into the creator races, and whatever happened before the Ice Age is just kind of like, who knows, but it's pretty wild.
There is an effort. You can sort of see that in Fizzbands, where they're trying to divorce the monster listings from setting specific stuff. And 4th edition, of course, moved away from the Forgotten Realms and concentrated on the world of Narath. So the cosmology of 4th edition is quite wildly different. And I'm really looking forward to bringing that to the Spelljammer and the Astral Sea. But because I'm a brand loyalist. I never abandoned ship during 4th edition, and so I feel I've got an opportunity to say, look what you missed out on. But yeah, dragons, of course, and Athos, the Dark Sun setting, are completely different. So when you step outside of the Forgotten Realms, dragons become something, that really, and I like the idea of, you've got these generic examples in Fizzbands, and then you can get really specific in the Forgotten Realms. It gets very complicated and very political very quickly.
It's interesting, I think, what Mr. X is talking about. Remember in that 1st edition, there was that Gygaxian naturalism, some people call it, where he was trying to come up with stuff that all made sense, and the genealogy and this and that. And as players, we always thought, does it really matter? I mean, if it's a world that breaks the laws of physics, but there was this attempt to tie everything together or to come up with that. And again, whether you think it worked or not, because it's a long time ago now, but it's interesting that Mr. X has read that stuff. I haven't thought about that in a long time, but you're right. That's what he was trying to figure out, where would they come from in this naturalistic, does evolution work in a fantastic world when things are melding reality itself? I guess
it's great that Opal was mentioning that the effect that dragons have on their environment. And think about, you have artifacts, powerful artifacts through the history of the Forgotten Realms. They go disappearing every now and then because they're sitting on a dragon horde somewhere. And that dragon is also getting influenced by the artifact. So they're exchanging magical energies with their environment all the time. They're just like a lich powering all the undead around them. They sort of just they're funneling everything and they feel everything. And I like gold dragons are an accentuate. They spend a lot of time in the mental realm, the astral realm, and they're sort of dreamy divination on, and they're keeping tabs on everything around them. So that can be really cool. But yeah, artifacts disappearing for a long period of time, probably got a dragon sitting on it somewhere.
Hence why you need to have dragon bankers and underwriters and insurance companies and probably politicians as well, and various other, maybe that king and queen, that's not actually a king and a queen, it's a dragon.
Dragon's looking at its hoard thinking, I can earn interest?
Yeah. And there's so many different ways too. Opal, did you want to say anything? Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next question. So, my suggestion to everybody out there is we've provided you with a whole bunch of ideas. Let us know what you've come up with in the comments section.